I'm Lauren, 32, married into the prestigious Montgomery family 3 years ago. My heart nearly stopped when my phone lit up with a text from an unknown number during my father-in-law's birthday lunch at Boston's most exclusive restaurant. Don't react. They're recording you. My fingers trembled against the white tablecloth as I casually glanced around. My in-laws continued their polite conversation, but their eyes held something calculating, something cold. If you're watching this, drop a comment letting me know where you're from. Hit that like and subscribe button to join our storytelling family. Have you ever received a message that sent chills down your spine? Let me know as we dive into what happened next. The Montgomery name carried weight in Boston. Real estate developments, luxury hotels, and office buildings across the skyline bore their logo. When I first met Michael at a charity gala where I was working as the event's graphic designer, I had no idea he was that Michael Montgomery. With his warm smile and genuine interest in my work, he seemed nothing like what I'd expect from Boston's elite. "Your invitation design captured exactly what we wanted for this event," he said, admiring the program in his hands. "Most designers go overboard with the flourishes, but you balanced elegance with accessibility." That was Michael. Observant, thoughtful, and completely different from his family. 3 months of dating passed before he finally took me to meet them at the Montgomery estate in Beacon Hill. The imposing brownstone, with its perfectly manicured front garden and gleaming brass fixtures, immediately intimidated me. "They'll love you," Michael assured me, squeezing my hand as we walked up the steps. "Just be yourself." Thomas Montgomery, Michael's father, greeted us at the door himself, rather than having the housekeeper do it, a power move I would later recognize as typical. At 62, then now 65, he stood tall and imposing, his silver hair perfectly coiffed, his handshake firm and assessing. "So, this is the designer," he said, looking me over with the same critical eye he likely used when evaluating property acquisitions. Not Michael's girlfriend, or even my name, just my profession, as if to remind me of my place. Eleanor Montgomery appeared next, gliding into the foyer with practiced grace. Her blonde hair was styled in an elegant bob, her pearls gleaming against her cream cashmere sweater. Her smile didn't reach her eyes as she air-kissed my cheeks. "What a lovely, colorful dress," she commented, her pause deliberately making me second-guess my carefully chosen outfit. "How unique." Dinner that night established the dynamic that would continue through our relationship and into our marriage. Jessica, Michael's older sister, arrived with her investment banker husband, Preston. Both Harvard Business School graduates, both impeccably dressed in understated luxury, both looking at me like I was an interesting specimen under glass. "Lauren was just telling us about her scholarship to Rhode Island School of Design," Michael said proudly during dinner. "A scholarship?" Eleanor repeated her tone, suggesting this confirmed, rather than dispelled her assumptions about my background. "How fortunate." "Not everyone has a trust fund, Mother," Michael replied, the first glimpse I got of the tension between them. Jessica leaned forward, her diamond earrings catching the light. "So, tell us, Lauren, what exactly do graphic designers earn these days? Is it a stable career?" The questions continued through 4 carefully orchestrated courses, each one probing my background, my family, my financial status, and my future plans. By dessert, I understood completely. I was being interviewed for a position I was already deemed unqualified for. My parents, a high school English teacher and a nurse practitioner, had raised me in a comfortable but modest home in Providence. We took 1 vacation each year, drove sensible cars, and I worked part-time jobs throughout college. Money was never abundant, but always sufficient. Values, education, and kindness were our currencies. In contrast, the Montgomerys measured worth in actual currency, prestigious connections, and family lineage. The vast gap between our worlds became increasingly apparent as Michael and I grew closer. "They'll adjust," Michael promised after he proposed, and I accepted. They just need time to see what I see in you. The engagement dinner was tense. Eleanor kept referring to the family heirloom ring that unfortunately wasn't available because it was being cleaned, a transparent lie since Jessica had worn it just the week before at a gala. Thomas took Michael aside for a man-to-man talk that left Michael tight-lipped and moody for days afterward. The wedding plans became a battleground. Eleanor pushed for an extravagant affair at the Boston Harbor Hotel with hundreds of business associates and social connections. I wanted something more intimate and meaningful. Michael supported me, but each decision became a power struggle. The Montgomerys have certain standards to uphold, Eleanor would say whenever I suggested something that didn't meet her approval. People expect a certain level of refinement. We compromised more than I wanted, but the wedding was beautiful despite Eleanor's thin-lipped smile when my college roommate sang, instead of the opera singer she'd suggested, and my father's emotional toast brought tears to every eye except hers. After 3 years of marriage, little had changed in the family dynamic. Michael had gradually taken on more responsibility in the family business, with Thomas reluctantly acknowledging his son's innovative ideas. I continued my graphic design work, building a respectable client list that included several well-known Boston businesses, though Eleanor always referred to my career as my little projects, or my hobby. The greatest tension centered around our decision to delay starting a family. In the Montgomery worldview, I should have produced an heir within the first year of marriage. My focus on establishing my design studio and Michael's desire to travel and enjoy our time as a couple before having children was met with increasing pressure and disapproval. "The biological clock waits for no one, Lauren," Eleanor would comment during family gatherings. Jessica was wise to start her family early. Jessica and Preston had 2 perfectly behaved children, Madison 7 and Bradley 5, who were already enrolled in Boston's most prestigious private academy and scheduled for tennis, Mandarin, and piano lessons. Jessica never failed to mention their accomplishments or the advantages of giving siblings close age spacing. "We're just not ready yet," became my standard response, though the truth was more complicated. Michael and I had been trying for 8 months with no success. A private struggle we kept between ourselves rather than exposing it to family scrutiny. The week before Thomas's 65th birthday lunch, Eleanor had called to touch base about the celebration. "We'll be at Maison Laurent, of course," she said, naming Boston's most exclusive French restaurant. "Do try to dress appropriately, Lauren. The chef has a Michelin star, and several of Thomas's business associates will be joining us." That call set off a flurry of anxiety as I searched for something to wear that would meet Eleanor's undefined but exacting standards. I finally settled on a navy sheath dress that cost more than my monthly studio rent justified as an investment piece that I could wear to client meetings. "You look stunning," Michael assured me as we drove to the restaurant. "Just remember, it's only a few hours." Only a few hours that would change everything between us. I spent extra time getting ready that morning. My new navy dress hugged my curves without being too tight. Professional, but still flattering. I'd splurged on having my caramel-colored hair professionally styled into loose waves that framed my face and applied makeup that enhanced my green eyes while still looking natural. "You didn't need to go to so much trouble," Michael said when I emerged from our bedroom. "You always look beautiful." His compliment bolstered my confidence, but I knew better. Eleanor Montgomery would notice every detail from my manicure to my shoe choice. After 3 years of marriage to her son, I'd learned that perfection was the minimum standard in her world. "Your father only turned 65 once," I replied, adjusting my simple pearl earrings, a wedding gift from Michael. "And you know how your mother gets about these things." Michael sighed, running a hand through his dark hair, a gesture so like his father's despite their different personalities. "I know. Just don't let her get to you. This is supposed to be a celebration, not an evaluation." The drive to Maison Laurent took us through Boston's historic streets, the fall foliage beginning to paint the trees in vibrant oranges and reds. Michael kept one hand on the steering wheel and the other holding mine, his thumb tracing reassuring circles. "Who all will be there?" I asked, mentally preparing myself. "Just family today," Michael replied. "Dad, Mom Jessica Preston. The business associates are coming to the separate event next week at the club." I nodded, relieved it would be a smaller gathering. Fewer witnesses to whatever subtle humiliations Eleanor might orchestrate. Maison Laurent occupied the ground floor of a beautifully restored historic building in Back Bay. The valet took our car, and Michael guided me through the ornate entrance doors. The maitre d' recognized Michael immediately. "Monsieur Montgomery, your family is already seated in the private room. Please follow me." The restaurant exuded old-world elegance, crystal chandeliers, plush carpeting muffling our footsteps, white linen tablecloths, and fresh flowers at each table. The private dining room was separate from the main restaurant with a large round table positioned under a smaller crystal chandelier. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked a meticulously landscaped garden. Thomas sat at what was clearly the head position, though round tables technically have no head. His imposing presence commanded attention, dressed in a perfectly tailored charcoal suit, despite this being a casual family lunch. Eleanor sat to his right, a vision in cream silk, with her signature pearls. Jessica and Preston occupied the next seats, leaving 2 spaces that separated me from Michael. Not a coincidence, I was certain. "Michael Lauren, you're right on time," Thomas said, checking his Patek Philippe watch, a gesture that emphasized we were neither fashionably late nor impressively early. Michael kissed his mother's cheek and shook hands with his father and brother-in-law before taking his assigned seat. I smiled warmly at everyone complimenting Eleanor on her outfit and wishing Thomas a happy birthday before settling into my chair. "Lauren, that's a lovely dress," Jessica commented. "Navy is so practical." I recognized the backhanded compliment for what it was, but maintained my smile. "Thank you. How are the children? I was hoping they might join us today." "Oh, Madison has her horse riding lessons on Saturdays, and Bradley is at his advanced mathematics program," Jessica replied, the subtle reminder of their children's packed schedule of elite activities not lost on me. "The nanny sent me these pictures just this morning." She pulled out her phone to show staged photos of her perfectly dressed children engaged in their respective activities. I made appropriate sounds of admiration while Eleanor beamed with grandmotherly pride. "Michael, when are you and Lauren going to give us some grandchildren to spoil?" Thomas asked bluntly, not for the first time. "You're not getting any younger, you know." Before Michael could respond with our standard deflection, Eleanor interjected. "Some women prefer to focus on their careers, Thomas. Lauren's little design business keeps her quite busy, doesn't it, dear?" The sommelier arrived, providing a welcome interruption as he presented the wine list to Thomas. After a lengthy discussion about vintages and regions, Thomas ordered different wines for different courses. I noticed Eleanor whispering something to the sommelier, who nodded discreetly. When our aperitif wines arrived, I couldn't help but notice that mine looked different from the others. A lighter color, possibly a different vintage altogether. "A toast," Thomas announced, raising his glass. "To another year of health, prosperity, and family success." We clinked glasses, and I took a small sip of my wine, which tasted slightly more acidic than I expected from a high-end restaurant. "So Michael, tell us about the waterfront development," Thomas directed, immediately turning the lunch conversation to business. For the next 20 minutes, I sat quietly as Thomas, Michael, and Preston discussed various real estate projects, market trends, and investment opportunities. Eleanor and Jessica occasionally interjected with comments about social connections that might benefit the business, dropping names of people they'd met at charity functions or country club events. I tried to contribute once when they mentioned a redevelopment project in an arts district, an area I was familiar with through my work with several galleries there. "The community artists are concerned about being priced out," I began. "There's actually a coalition forming to—" "Lauren, dear," Eleanor interrupted smoothly. "Could you pass the bread? These business matters must be so tedious for you." The first course arrived, an elaborate salad with ingredients I couldn't fully identify, artfully arranged on oversized white plates. As we began eating, Eleanor directed the conversation toward Jessica and Preston's recent trip to the French Riviera. "The villa was absolutely stunning," Jessica gushed. "Private beach access, full staff, and the most magnificent view of the Mediterranean. We're thinking of buying a similar property there, aren't we, Preston?" Preston nodded, explaining the investment potential of European real estate in exhausting detail. I noticed Michael's attention drifting, his usual enthusiasm for family gatherings notably absent. The second course arrived, different for each person. Thomas and Michael received perfectly seared scallops. Eleanor and Jessica had delicate lobster dishes. Preston got foie gras, and I was served a mushroom risotto that hadn't been mentioned as an option. "I specifically ordered the sea bass for Lauren," Michael said, frowning at the server. "My apologies, sir, but we were instructed that Madame has dietary restrictions," the server replied, glancing briefly toward Eleanor. "I don't have any dietary restrictions," I said, confused. Eleanor waved a dismissive hand. "I simply remembered you mentioning once that you didn't care for fish, Lauren. I was trying to be thoughtful." I had never said any such thing. In fact, I loved seafood, but challenging Eleanor would only create tension. I smiled tightly and thanked her for her thoughtfulness. As I picked at my risotto, which was admittedly delicious despite not being what I wanted, my phone vibrated in my clutch bag beside me. Normally, I would never check my phone during a family meal, but something, intuition perhaps, made me discreetly glance at the screen while Eleanor was engrossed in describing a charity gala she was organizing. The message on my screen made my blood run cold. "Don't react, they're recording you." My hand trembled as I returned my phone to my bag, careful to keep my expression neutral. I took a sip of water, trying to process what I'd just read. An unknown number, no contact name. Recording me, why, and who would warn me? I glanced around the table, suddenly seeing the gathering with new eyes. Eleanor's designer purse was positioned strangely on the table, angled toward me, rather than resting beside her as it normally would. Preston kept checking his phone under the table. Jessica had placed her own phone on the table screen, down-positioned, as if it might be capturing audio. My heartbeat accelerated as fear washed over me. What were they trying to record? What was their purpose? And most importantly, how should I respond? I maintained my composure externally while my mind raced through possibilities. This wasn't the first time I'd felt targeted by Michael's family, but recording me secretly took their disapproval to a disturbing new level. "Excuse me," I said during a brief lull in conversation. "I need to visit the ladies' room." Eleanor nodded with a tight smile. "Of course, dear. We'll order the main course while you're gone." As I walked away from the table, I could feel their eyes on my back, watching, evaluating, and possibly recording my every move. In the elegant marble bathroom of Maison Laurent, I locked myself in a stall and took several deep breaths, trying to calm my racing heart. I pulled out my phone to examine the message more carefully. "Don't react. They're recording you." I tried calling the number, but it went straight to voicemail with no personalized greeting. I sent a reply. "Who is this? How do you know?" 3 dots appeared immediately, indicating the person was typing. "Friend, Eleanor paid server to place recording device under table near you. Jessica's phone recording too. They want to catch you saying something they can use." My hands were shaking so badly I could barely type. "Use for what?" "To convince Michael you're not good enough. They have meeting with family lawyer next week. Heard them planning in kitchen before you arrived." The pieces started falling into place. The separate wine pour, the wrong meal order, the leading questions. They were trying to provoke me, to get me on record saying something they could twist and use against me. "What should I do?" I typed. "Play along for now. I have evidence of their plan. We'll send soon. Stay calm." I stared at my reflection in the bathroom mirror, noting the flush of anxiety on my cheeks. 3 years of subtle undermining, of backhanded compliments, of being treated like an outsider, and now this. Direct sabotage. I splashed cold water on my wrists, a technique my mother taught me to calm down. Mom had always said, when people show you who they are, believe them. The Montgomerys had been showing me who they were for years, but I'd kept hoping things would improve for Michael's sake. Taking another deep breath, I reapplied my lipstick with steady hands and straightened my shoulders. Whatever game they were playing, I refused to be a passive victim in it. When I returned to the table, the main courses had arrived. Everyone else had elaborate steak or lamb dishes. My plate contained a small chicken breast with steamed vegetables. The kind of uninspired, overly cautious dish you'd serve someone you thought had numerous food restrictions or unsophisticated tastes. "We ordered for you, dear," Eleanor said with a thin smile. "The chef's special chicken dish. We know how you prefer simpler foods." Another lie. I'd never expressed such a preference. "How thoughtful," I replied evenly, taking my seat. Thomas was in the middle of telling a story about a business rival's recent failure, clearly enjoying the man's misfortune. I noticed Michael seemed unusually quiet, his normal energy subdued. He was on his third glass of wine, unusual for him at lunch, and seemed to be having trouble focusing on the conversation. My phone vibrated again in my bag. I waited for a natural moment when Jessica was showing vacation photos to check it discreetly. "Check Michael's water glass. They drugged him to make him agreeable for later discussion about your marriage." Ice flooded my veins. I glanced at Michael's water glass, noting a faint cloudiness that could easily be dismissed as mineral content. Michael had been drinking from it between wine glasses. I watched him take another sip and subtly rub his forehead as if fighting off confusion. They had drugged my husband. My husband. Their son. Something shifted inside me at that moment. The fear and anxiety transformed into a cold, clear anger and determination. These people weren't just trying to undermine me anymore. They were actively attempting to manipulate and drug their own family member. "Michael, are you feeling all right?" I asked, keeping my voice light. "You seem a little flushed." "Just a slight headache," he replied, his words carefully enunciated as if he was concentrating on speaking clearly. "Probably the wine on an empty stomach." "Here, drink my water instead of yours," I said smoothly, switching our glasses before anyone could object. "I haven't touched it yet." Eleanor's eyes narrowed slightly, but her social training prevented her from making a scene. "Michael has always been sensitive to certain wines," she commented. "Perhaps you should switch to water for the rest of the meal, dear." "I think that's wise," I agreed, watching Michael carefully. Would they really go so far as to drug him? What exactly had they given him? Another text arrived. "Lawyer ready when you are. Evidence of their conspiracy saved." I made a decision then. I was done being passive, done trying to earn approval from people who had decided before they even met me that I would never be good enough. Thomas had shifted the conversation to family history, talking about the Montgomery legacy and the importance of preserving family traditions and values. "Which is why," he was saying, "maintaining the integrity of the Montgomery name has always been our highest priority." "Speaking of family traditions," I interrupted smoothly. "Eleanor, didn't you mention last week that you had a meeting with Harrison Davis? Isn't he the family attorney?" Eleanor's fork paused halfway to her mouth, her composure slipping momentarily before she recovered. "I don't recall mentioning any such meeting, Lauren. You must be mistaken." "That's odd," I continued pleasantly, "because I distinctly remember you telling Jessica on the phone about meeting with him to discuss the situation. I assumed it was about Thomas's birthday celebration." Jessica shot her mother a panicked glance before jumping in. "Mom was probably talking about Daddy's estate planning review. It's routine done every year on his birthday." "Of course," I nodded, pulling out my phone and placing it on the table screen down, mimicking Jessica's earlier positioning. "That makes perfect sense. Just like how it makes sense that Jessica was looking through Michael's office files last weekend when we were supposed to be out at the symphony." Michael's eyebrows drew together in confusion. What, Jessica was at our house? Jessica's cheeks flushed red. I dropped by to leave a gift, but you weren't home. I didn't go into any office. That's strange, I replied, maintaining my pleasant tone. Because our security camera caught someone who looks exactly like you going into Michael's office and photographing documents on his desk. I assumed Michael had asked you to get something for him. This was a complete fabrication. We had no such security camera footage, but the effect was immediate. Jessica paled, and Preston suddenly became very interested in his lamb chop. I think there's been a misunderstanding. Thomas interjected, his authoritative voice attempting to regain control of the situation. Perhaps we should focus on enjoying this excellent meal. You're absolutely right, Thomas, I agreed warmly. Family time is so precious, isn't it? Speaking of which, Preston, I was surprised to hear you mention the Michael situation when I overheard you on the phone in your office lobby last Tuesday. I was there dropping off the designs for your new corporate brochure with your assistant and couldn't help but overhear. It sounded serious. Preston's fork clattered against his plate. I don't know what you think you heard, but it was something about, once we have the evidence, we can proceed with the plan. I assumed it was a business matter, but now I'm wondering if it was something more personal. The table had gone completely silent. Michael was looking around in confusion, the effects of whatever they'd given him clearly impacting his comprehension. Lauren, I don't know what game you're playing, Eleanor said coldly, but these insinuations are completely inappropriate for Thomas's birthday celebration. Game, I echoed innocently. I'm not playing any games, Eleanor. Unlike someone who would say, record a family conversation without consent, or perhaps drug someone's water to make them more compliant. I reached over and picked up Michael's original water glass, which I had switched with mine. I wonder what a lab analysis of this water would show. Something to make Michael agreeable during a discussion about our marriage, perhaps. The blood drained from Eleanor's face. What the hell is going on? Michael demanded, his voice stronger now that he'd stopped drinking the drugged water. What are you all talking about? I turned to my husband, placing my hand gently on his arm. Michael, I believe your family has been planning something concerning our marriage. They've been recording our conversation today, possibly to catch me saying something they could use against me. That's absurd, Thomas blustered, though his confident demeanor had cracked. Lauren, you're being paranoid and ruining my birthday with these wild accusations. I pulled out my phone and displayed the text messages from my unknown ally. Am I? Then perhaps you can explain why I received these warnings, or why Jessica was photographing our financial documents, or why Eleanor specifically ordered me different food and wine from everyone else, or why your water, Michael, appears to have been tampered with. Michael's confusion was turning to anger as clarity began to return. Is this true? Have you all been plotting against Lauren, against us? The facade of family harmony completely collapsed. We were trying to protect you. Eleanor burst out, her carefully maintained composure shattering. She's not one of us, Michael. She never has been. She doesn't understand our world, our responsibilities. What exactly were you protecting me from? Michael demanded. My wife, the woman I chose to marry. From making a mistake that would cost you your inheritance, your position in the family business, your future, Thomas stated coldly. We had concerns about Lauren's motivations. My motivations? I repeated incredulously. I've worked hard to build my own career rather than living off Michael's money. I've tried for 3 years to fit into your world, despite being constantly judged and found wanting. What exactly do you think my motivations are? Money, of course, Eleanor said dismissively. The Montgomery fortune. Why else would someone like you marry someone like Michael? The hurt that lanced through me at her words was physical, like a knife between the ribs. 3 years of trying to belong, of enduring subtle put-downs, of hoping they would eventually see me for who I really was. all wasted on people who had already decided what kind of person I must be based solely on my background. Because I love him, I said quietly. Something that apparently means nothing to you compared to social status and bank accounts. A movement at the edge of my vision caught my attention. A server had partially entered the room, then quickly retreated upon sensing the tension. Something about her seemed familiar, though I couldn't place why. "This is outrageous," Michael said, standing up so abruptly his chair nearly toppled backward. "You've been conspiring behind my back trying to sabotage my marriage, recording private conversations, drugging me." "Sit down, Michael," Thomas commanded. "You're making a scene." "I think the scene was already well in progress before I stood up," Michael retorted. "How long has this been going on? What exactly were you planning to do with whatever evidence you thought you were gathering?" Jessica, surprisingly, was the one who broke. "It wasn't my idea," she blurted out. "Mom and Dad have been meeting with Harrison for weeks trying to find grounds to invoke the fidelity and conduct clauses in your prenup." "Jessica," Eleanor hissed. "No, Mother, this has gone far enough." Jessica continued, tears gathering in her eyes. "They wanted to prove Lauren married you for money or catch her doing something that would violate the prenup so you could divorce her without having to give her anything." I felt numb. The prenuptial agreement I'd signed had indeed contained clauses about fidelity and conduct befitting the Montgomery name. But I'd never imagined they would actively try to manufacture evidence against me. "And you went along with this?" Michael asked his sister, disbelief and hurt evident in his voice. Jessica looked down at her plate. "They said it was to protect you, to protect the family." "Some protection," Michael scoffed. "Lying, scheming, drugging. Is this what the Montgomery name really stands for?" A new text flashed on my phone. "Come to kitchen entrance, bringing final evidence. You've done perfectly." "Excuse me?" I said quietly, standing up. "I need some air." "Lauren?" Michael began reaching for my hand. "It's okay," I assured him. "I'll be right back. I think there's someone I need to meet." As I walked toward the kitchen instead of the bathroom, I heard the argument continuing behind me. Thomas was demanding Michael see reason, while Eleanor alternated between denying everything and justifying their actions as being for Michael's own good. Near the kitchen entrance, partially hidden by an ornamental pillar, stood a middle-aged woman in a server's uniform. As I approached, recognition dawned. Sarah, the Montgomerys' longtime housekeeper who had recently retired, according to Eleanor. "Sarah," I whispered, shocked to see her here. "You sent the texts." She nodded, her kind eyes filled with determination. "I couldn't let them do to you what they did to me 25 years ago." "What do you mean?" "I wasn't always the housekeeper, Lauren. I was married to Eleanor's brother, Robert. When I didn't meet their standards, they orchestrated a similar plan. By the time they were done, Robert believed I had only married him for his money. Our divorce left me with nothing, and the only job I could get was working as their housekeeper." I stared at her in shock. Eleanor's brother? I didn't even know she had a brother. They've effectively erased him from family history because he died of a drug overdose 10 years after our divorce. They blamed me for his spiral, though he had problems long before we met. Sarah handed me a small USB drive. "This contains recordings of Eleanor and Thomas planning everything with Harrison Davis. I also have testimony from the server they paid to drug Michael's water and the tech person they hired to place the recording device." "Why would you risk your retirement to help me?" I asked, genuinely moved. "Because I've watched you try for 3 years. Because Michael loves you in a way Robert never quite loved me. Because sometimes the cycle needs to be broken." She squeezed my hand. "They destroyed my life, but they don't have to destroy yours. Go back in there and finish what you started." With the USB drive clutched in my hand like a talisman, I returned to the private dining room. The argument had escalated with Michael now standing protectively near my empty chair. "Lauren has been nothing but loving and supportive," he was saying heatedly. "She's worked hard to fit into this family despite how you've treated her. If anyone should be questioned about their motives, it's all of you." I cleared my throat and all heads turned toward me. "I have something you all should see," I said calmly, holding up the USB drive. "Evidence of a conspiracy against me and Michael, including recordings of meetings with your lawyer where you explicitly planned to fabricate evidence against me." Eleanor's face went from pale to ashen. Thomas's jaw clenched so tight I could see the muscle working in his cheek. "Where did you get that?" he demanded. "From someone you underestimated, just as you've underestimated me," I replied. "I know everything. About the plan to invoke the prenup clauses, about the recording device under the table, about the drugged water, about Jessica photographing our financial documents." "This is absurd," Eleanor began, but her protest sounded weak even to my ears. "What's on the drive, Lauren?" Michael asked quietly. "Recordings of your parents meeting with Harrison Davis planning how to gather or manufacture evidence against me. Testimony from the server they bribed to drug your water. Evidence of the recording device they planted." I turned to face Thomas and Eleanor directly. "Did you really hate me that much? Was I really so terrible for Michael that you needed to resort to this?" For the first time since I'd known her, Eleanor seemed at a loss for words. "We were protecting our legacy," Thomas said stiffly. "The Montgomery name means something in this city. And now it will mean something else entirely if this becomes public," I pointed out. "Imagine the scandal. Prominent Boston family caught drugging their own son to manipulate him into divorcing his wife." Thomas blanched at the implied threat, but I wasn't finished. "But that's not what I want," I continued. "Despite everything, you're still Michael's family. What I want is respect, acceptance. To be treated as Michael's wife, not an interloper you're plotting to remove." Michael moved to stand beside me, his arm wrapping around my waist. "I think we're done here," he said firmly. "Lauren and I are leaving. Don't contact us until you're ready to apologize and make significant changes in how you treat her, how you treat us." "Michael, be reasonable," Thomas began. "I am being reasonable," Michael interrupted. "More reasonable than you deserve after what you've done." "Lauren is my wife. She is my family. If you can't accept that, then you're choosing not to be part of our lives." As we turned to leave, Jessica suddenly stood up. "Wait," she called. I'm sorry, Lauren. I never should have gone along with this. It was wrong." The unexpected apology stopped me. I looked at Jessica, really looked at her, and saw not the confident, perfect sister-in-law, but a woman who had been molded by the same expectations and manipulations that they were trying to use on Michael. "Thank you for saying that," I replied sincerely. "Perhaps I could call you next week," she offered tentatively. "Just to talk." I nodded, surprised by the overture, but willing to leave a door open. Michael and I walked out of Maison Laurent together, united in a way we hadn't been before. As we reached our car, I glanced back at the restaurant, wondering what conversations were happening in that private dining room now that we were gone. "I can't believe they would go so far," Michael said as we drove away, his voice tight with controlled anger. "Drugging me, recording us, planning to use our prenup against you? It's unforgivable." I reached over and took his hand. "They thought they were protecting you. It's twisted and wrong, but in their minds they were acting out of love." "That's not love," Michael said firmly. "That's control, and it stops now." As we drove home in silence, I realized that sometimes it takes a crisis to clarify what truly matters. The Montgomerys had tried to tear us apart, but had instead forced us to stand together more firmly than ever before. The unknown text that had started it all had led not to my humiliation as they had planned, but to their exposure. And somehow, I felt stronger for having faced them directly. rather than continuing to endure the subtle undermining that had characterized the past 3 years. Whatever came next, Michael and I would face it together, and that was worth more than the entire Montgomery fortune. The days following the disastrous birthday lunch passed in a blur of emotional conversations and difficult decisions. Michael and I spent hours talking through what had happened and what it meant for our relationship with his family going forward. "I still can't believe they went so far," Michael said, repeatedly pacing our living room as we discussed the events for what felt like the 100th time. "Drugging me, recording private conversations. What were they thinking?" "They were thinking you married beneath you," I replied gently, "and that I needed to be removed before I could damage the Montgomery legacy." Michael stopped pacing to look at me, his expression pained. "How can you be so calm about this? They tried to destroy our marriage." I considered his question carefully. The truth was, I wasn't calm inside. I felt betrayed, hurt, and angry, but I also felt strangely liberated. After 3 years of trying to earn approval from people determined to withhold it, I no longer felt that burden. "Because now everything is in the open," I finally answered. "No more wondering if I'm imagining their dislike. No more walking on eggshells trying to earn their approval. They showed their true colors, and now we can respond accordingly." The day after the lunch, Thomas called Michael, his tone businesslike, as if nothing unusual had happened. "We need to discuss the Cambridge development proposal. I've scheduled a meeting for tomorrow morning." "I'm taking a few days off," Michael replied coolly. "The meeting will need to be rescheduled." Thomas's surprise was audible even through the phone's speaker. Michael had never before prioritized personal matters over business. "This is a critical juncture for the project. Your presence is required." "My presence is required at home with my wife dealing with the aftermath of your attempt to sabotage our marriage," Michael stated firmly. "Preston can handle the meeting." "Michael," Thomas began, his tone hardening. "If you want to discuss what happened at lunch, I'm open to that conversation. If you want to pretend it didn't happen and go back to business as usual, I'm not available." With that, Michael ended the call, another first in his relationship with his domineering father. Eleanor's approach was more indirect. She sent a lavish flower arrangement to our home with a card that read, "Let's put this unfortunate misunderstanding behind us." No apology, no acknowledgement of wrongdoing, just an expectation that we would sweep everything under the rug as the Montgomerys had always done with unpleasant realities. "Should we send them back?" Michael asked, eyeing the arrangement with distaste. "No," I decided, "but we won't acknowledge them either." The flowers sat untouched in our entryway until they wilted a silent statement that business as usual was no longer acceptable. Jessica surprisingly made the most genuine effort to make amends. She called 3 days after the lunch, her voice hesitant and lacking its usual confident polish. "Lauren, it's Jessica. I was wondering if we could meet for coffee." I hesitated, unsure if this was another Montgomery manipulation. "Why?" "Because I owe you an apology, a real one face to face," she replied. "What we did, what I participated in, was wrong, and I'd like a chance to explain if you're willing to listen." After consulting with Michael, I agreed to meet Jessica at a neutral cafe far from the usual Montgomery haunts. She arrived without her typical perfect appearance, her hair in a simple ponytail, minimal makeup, dressed in jeans and a sweater rather than her usual designer attire. "Thank you for meeting me," she said, sliding into the seat across from me. "I wouldn't have blamed you for refusing." "I almost did," I admitted. "Why did you go along with their plan, Jessica? I thought we were starting to build a relationship." She stared down at her coffee cup, uncharacteristically vulnerable. "It's complicated. I've never defied my parents, not really. When they presented this plan as protecting Michael and the family legacy, I didn't question it as much as I should have. Even though it meant betraying your brother and me, I told myself it was for Michael's own good, she said, finally meeting my eyes. That if you were only after the Montgomery money, he deserved to know. That if you weren't, well, you'd never know about the plan anyway. But you knew better, I challenged her. You've seen us together. You know our relationship is real. Jessica nodded slowly. I do, and that's the part I'm most ashamed of. I ignored what I could see with my own eyes because it was easier than standing up to our parents. Her honesty surprised me. In the 3 years I'd known Jessica, she had never shown this kind of self-awareness or vulnerability. Do you know about Sarah? I asked. Jessica's brow furrowed in confusion. Our former housekeeper, what about her? I explained what Sarah had revealed, that she had been married to Eleanor's brother, that the family had orchestrated a similar plan to drive them apart, that she had spent decades working as their housekeeper after losing everything in the divorce. I had no idea, Jessica whispered, genuinely shocked. Mom told us Uncle Robert's wife abandoned him for another man. I didn't even know Sarah was that same woman. They've been lying to you too, Jessica, I said gently. About more than you realize. Our conversation lasted for hours, peeling back layers of Montgomery family dynamics that Jessica herself had never fully examined. She shared stories of growing up under Eleanor's exacting standards, of Thomas's clear expectations that his children would prioritize the family business and legacy above all else, of the constant pressure to maintain appearances regardless of reality. I don't want Madison and Bradley growing up like that, she concluded, tears in her eyes. I don't want them learning that manipulation and control are forms of love. By the time we parted, something had shifted between us. Not friendship exactly, not yet, but a mutual understanding and a tentative alliance. I'm going to talk to Preston, she promised. About setting boundaries with my parents, about changing how we interact with them. It won't be easy, but after seeing what they were willing to do to you and Michael, I can't just go back to pretending everything is normal. The most unexpected development came a week after the lunch when Sarah contacted me again. We met at a small park near our home, sitting on a bench, overlooking a duck pond. I've given my notice at the Montgomery house, she told me. For real this time, not the retirement Eleanor invented to explain my absence. What will you do? I asked, concerned about her future. Sarah smiled, a genuine expression that took years off her face. I've been saving for decades. Living in the staff quarters meant minimal expenses, and while the Montgomerys didn't pay generously, they paid consistently. I have enough to buy a small condo and live modestly. I'm glad, I said sincerely. After everything you've been through, you deserve peace. What about you and Michael? She asked. Have you decided how to handle the family going forward? It was the question Michael and I had been grappling with all week. Cut ties completely. Maintain a distant relationship. Try to rebuild on new terms. None of the options felt entirely right. We're still figuring it out, I admitted. Michael has taken a leave of absence from Montgomery Developments to gain some perspective. We're considering whether he wants to continue in the family business at all. That would be Thomas's worst nightmare, Sarah observed. The Montgomery legacy matters more to him than anything, even his children's happiness. I know, and I don't want Michael to cut ties with his family entirely because of me. I sighed. Despite everything, they're still his parents. Sometimes distance is the only way to establish healthy boundaries, Sarah said wisely. It doesn't have to be forever, but it might need to be for now. Michael and I ultimately decided on a middle path. He would return to Montgomery Developments, but in a redefined role with clear boundaries between business and personal matters. We would attend family functions, but leave immediately if Eleanor or Thomas began their old patterns of subtle undermining. And most importantly, we would be completely transparent with each other about any interactions with his family. 2 weeks after the lunch, Thomas finally requested a meeting with both of us. We agreed to meet at our home, rather than the Montgomery estate or a restaurant. Neutral territory was no longer enough. We needed home field advantage. Thomas arrived precisely on time alone, a significant departure from the normal pattern where Eleanor orchestrated all family interactions. "Thank you for agreeing to see me," he said formally as he took a seat in our living room. For the first time since I'd known him, Thomas Montgomery looked uncomfortable, even slightly diminished, without his usual backdrop of power and privilege. "We're listening," Michael replied, his arm around my shoulders as we sat together on the sofa opposite his father. Thomas cleared his throat. "What happened at my birthday lunch was inappropriate. The recording devices, the medication in Michael's water. It crossed a line that shouldn't have been crossed." I noted that he carefully avoided using words like wrong or apologize, framing it as a tactical error rather than a moral failing. "That's understating things considerably, Dad," Michael said. "You and Mom tried to sabotage my marriage based on classist assumptions about Lauren's background and motives." Thomas shifted in his seat. "We were concerned about the family's interests." "I am part of the family," Michael replied firmly. "Lauren is part of the family. Our interests are family interests." "Of course," Thomas conceded, though I could see it cost him to do so. "And that's partly why I'm here. Your absence from the business has been noticeable. The Cambridge development team specifically has been asking for your input." And there it was, the real reason for Thomas's visit. Not reconciliation or genuine remorse, but business necessity. "I'll return to work next week," Michael said, "but with changes. I'll be focusing exclusively on project development and client relationships. I'm stepping back from family portfolio management and board meetings for the foreseeable future." Thomas frowned. "That's not practical. As a Montgomery, you have responsibilities to—" "As a husband," Michael interrupted, "I have responsibilities to my wife. As a man, I have responsibilities to my own integrity. The company will get my professional expertise. The family relationship needs to heal before I'll engage beyond that." I watched Thomas struggle with this redefinition of terms. For his entire life, family and business had been inseparable concepts. Michael was now drawing a clear line between them, and Thomas clearly found it disorienting. "And what would healing look like to you?" Thomas finally asked, addressing the question to both of us. I leaned forward slightly. "Respect, genuine acceptance, acknowledgement of the harm that was done, and a commitment not to repeat those patterns. No more backhanded compliments, no more exclusion, no more treating me like an outsider who needs to be removed." "And a real apology," Michael added. "Not just to Lauren, but to me as well. What you and Mom did violated my trust in profound ways." Thomas was silent for a long moment, weighing his options. I could almost see the calculations happening behind his eyes. The business need for Michael's involvement versus the personal cost of a genuine apology and changed behavior. "I'll speak with your mother," he finally said. "This situation has been difficult for everyone, but I recognize that changes are necessary if we're to move forward as a family." It wasn't the full acknowledgement we'd hoped for, but it was a start, a crack in the formidable Montgomery facade that might, with time and consistent pressure, widen enough to allow for real change. As Thomas prepared to leave, he paused at the door. "Your mother may need more time," he warned. "This has been challenging for her to process." "We're not on her timeline anymore," Michael replied simply. "When she's ready to have an honest conversation, we'll be here. Until then, we're focusing on our own family unit." After Thomas left, Michael pulled me into a tight embrace. "Are you okay?" he murmured against my hair. "I am," I replied, surprised to realize it was true. For the first time since I joined this family, I feel like we're on solid ground. Like we're partners, facing them together, instead of me standing alone while you're caught in the middle. Never again, Michael promised. I should have stood up to them years ago. I'm sorry it took something this extreme to wake me up. We both needed the wake-up call, I admitted. I've been trying so hard to earn their approval that I lost sight of the fact that I never needed it. I have you. That's what matters. 6 months passed with carefully negotiated family interactions. Thomas made genuine, if sometimes awkward, efforts to treat me with respect. Eleanor maintained a chilly distance but refrained from overt hostility. Jessica and I developed a tentative friendship based on our new understanding of the Montgomery family dynamics. And then, unexpectedly, everything changed again. I'm pregnant, I told Michael one ordinary Tuesday evening as he returned from work. Twins, actually. His face transformed with joy as he lifted me in a careful embrace, spinning me around our kitchen. Really? Are you sure? How far along? 8 weeks? I confirmed, laughing at his enthusiasm. The doctor confirmed it today. Identical twins, Michael. 2 babies. As the news sank in, I saw the flicker of uncertainty cross his face. My parents. I took his hands in mine. We'll be grandparents to our children. How we navigate that relationship is up to us, not them. When we shared the news with the Montgomerys at a carefully orchestrated dinner at a neutral restaurant, no private dining rooms. This time, their reactions were revealing. Thomas's eyes lit up with unmistakable joy before he controlled his expression. Twins. That's wonderful news. The first Montgomery twins in 3 generations. Eleanor's reaction was more complicated, a mixture of genuine excitement at becoming a grandmother and calculation about how this changed the family dynamics. When are you due? We'll need to prepare the nursery at the main house for when you visit. We'll have a perfectly good nursery at our own home, I replied pleasantly but firmly. The babies will be comfortable there for any visits. Jessica, surprisingly, was the most genuinely enthusiastic. Madison and Bradley will be so excited to have cousins and twins. That's incredible. The pregnancy shifted something fundamental in the family ecosystem. My position as the mother of the next generation of Montgomerys gave me new status that even Eleanor couldn't entirely dismiss. Thomas began including me in family discussions in a way he never had before. Eleanor, while still maintaining some emotional distance, began sending baby-related articles and suggestions that were actually thoughtful rather than critical. Most significantly, the expectation that I would eventually leave the family, the underlying assumption that had fueled their recording scheme, was replaced by an acknowledgement that I was permanently part of the Montgomery future. 1 year after the infamous birthday lunch, we gathered again for Thomas's 66th birthday. This time, the celebration was at our home, with me visibly pregnant with twins. The dynamic was entirely different. Not perfect, not without tension, but fundamentally transformed. As I watched Michael laughing with his father over glasses of scotch, Jessica showing me ultrasound photos of our twins that I'd shared earlier, and even Eleanor making an effort to ask about my latest design projects, I caught Sarah's eye across the room. We had maintained our friendship, and I had insisted on inviting her to family gatherings despite Eleanor's initial objections. Sarah raised her glass in a subtle toast, her eyes conveying what we both knew: the cycle had been broken. The pattern of Montgomery family dysfunction hadn't been completely healed, but it had been interrupted. And our children would grow up in a different environment than the one that had shaped Michael and Jessica. An environment where love didn't come with conditions, where worth wasn't measured by social status or bank accounts, and where family meant supporting each other rather than controlling each other. The mysterious text that had started it all, "Don't react, they're recording you," had ultimately led not to my expulsion from the family as they had planned, but to a fundamental restructuring of what the Montgomery family could be. Sometimes I realized it takes being pushed to your breaking point to find your true strength. Sometimes you have to face your worst fears to discover they don't have the power to destroy you. And sometimes The family you build is stronger than the one you're born into or marry into. With the twins' arrival just months away, I placed a protective hand over my rounded belly and made a silent promise to our children. They would know their worth came from within, not from living up to impossible external standards. They would understand that real love empowers rather than controls, and they would grow up seeing their mother and father as equal partners who face the world and family together. If you've ever had to stand up to toxic family members or navigate difficult in-law relationships, I'd love to hear your story in the comments. How did you establish boundaries while maintaining your dignity? Did you find allies in unexpected places like I found Sarah? Don't forget to like this video if it resonated with you and subscribe to hear more stories about finding your voice in challenging relationships. Share this with someone who might need to hear that standing up for yourself isn't selfish. It's necessary for creating healthy family dynamics. Thank you for listening to my journey from fear to empowerment. Remember, your worth isn't determined by others' approval, and sometimes receiving an unexpected warning message can be the catalyst for positive change in your life.